Today on Tips from the Top Floor, a rapid-fire question and answer episode. Adam is interested in avoiding losing his photos in times of ransomware. Hampus is going whale watching to Iceland and wonders what focal length makes the most sense. And Haram noticed strange focusing artifacts in a Quentin Tarantino movie. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 780 for Thursday, June the 15th, 2017.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, alright, from the top floor.
Hey, a wonderful good day to you out there in Top Floor land. I hope you had a great weekend and a wonderful time. I've just finished a workshop that we've held here in the Viewfinder Villa. It's the Die Macht der Bilder, German workshop about perception, about how photos work on a very low level basis. What does a photo do to you when you look at it? And I held this together with a friend of mine who happens to be a psychologist who kind of fills in those blanks that I have when I can only go to a certain level to explain why photos work, and he can fill in this other part, which is, every time we do this, every one of us, including him and myself, learn some new insights, and we did this together with a wonderful group of people here in Hanover in the Viewfinder Villa, and I'm still beaming because it was such a great learning experience. Anyway, this episode is a Q&A episode. I have 3 questions from you wonderful people and hopefully 3 answers. Also, just one little piece of news before we get started. Kodachrome is back! Yay, but not in the way you might think. It's not the film, okay? It's a magazine. It's Kodak builds it as the brand new journal for anyone who loves art, film, and analog culture. So anyway, what is not the film? Hey, it's great that they're doing something. It's not cheap. It's $20 and it's already been sold out. I'm sure they probably underestimated the interest in that. But it's now in back order, so I assume they'll do another print run. And I will link to that, to the store. It's US only as I see it now. They don't ship it outside the United States, even though I guess they're getting a lot of demand for that. Wow, $20 for a magazine. But hey, anyway, I was curious enough to put a little question out on the TFTTF Slack. And a big shout out to Will, who has already organized one for me and is going to send it over to me. Will, you're amazing. Thank you so much for that. Okay, let's get on with your wonderful questions. Here is the first one.
Hello Chris, this is Hiram from India, and I've been listening to your show for quite a while now, and so I was watching this movie, Hateful Eight, and at about 2 hours, 36 minute mark, there's a scene where there's an actor sitting in the foreground and then there's an actor sitting in the background, and somehow both of them are in focus, but the area between them is out of focus. Just wanted to know how this is achieved, or what lens do they use, or is this some trickery? Because if I understand, this movie was shot on film, so just wanted to get an idea about that. Thanks and love the show.
Hello, Haram. The Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino was shot on film. And I think was even shot on Ultra Panavision, which is like there's this whole amazing story behind it. And they shot this with lenses that were like original Panasonic Panavision lenses that were last used in the 1960s. And it's this whole endeavor to shoot this on this amazing format. It's really an amazing format. And yes, Tarantino has some scenes in there, in some of his movies actually, that have this weird, very close and very far focus thing. And that is not really achievable with a regular lens. So you'd have to have like such a small aperture that you wouldn't have enough light, and it wouldn't work out with film. So I was first thinking, oh, is that a tilt shift lens? Because there you can actually change the focal plane and tilt it in the space, so that part of it is close focus, part of it is at far focus, and that's not what it is. So next thing is, was it done digitally in post-production? Because that's pretty much what you do these days. You shoot something on film, or some directors shoot film, and then they digitize it, and it goes to color grading, and then there is still there's still space for digital trickery. But hey, it's Tarantino, so I wouldn't really expect that to happen, to be honest. And then there is something that I know was used by some filmmakers, and that's called the split diopter. And it's pretty much a close-up lens that you put on the front of the lens, as in, just a general close-up lens that you add. But it's only half. It's only half a close-up lens. That's why it's called a split diopter. And it has been used in many famous films. Citizen Kane has scenes with it. Carrie, Blowout. Spielberg used it in Jaws and in Close Encounters. Carpenter used it in The Thing, and Jim Jarmusch in Night on Earth or Mission Impossible. It's one of these things that a lot of filmmakers actually use. And the moment you put one of those on your lens, the half of that split diopter that does nothing, that's the open part, that will just focus as usual, right? It won't change anything. And the other part will then focus closer. So you could have different focus distances on the left half and on the right half, or on the top and on the bottom. Now, of course, there's that area in the middle. That's the transition between those two, and that is visible. And is visible as a blurry, kind of strange-looking area. And the directors have to make sure to kind of hide that away. And often that's done by making use of like the set, the architecture, something bright next to something dark, and that line would then just kind of disappear in that transition. And that's what they use. So, Haram, back to your question. When I did research, I actually found that yes, Quentin Tarantino also uses the split diopter in The Hateful Eight. So that's what you found. And not only there, by the way, he used it in Reservoir Dogs. He used it in Pulp Fiction. He used it in Jackie Brown. He used it in the second Kill Bill movie. And I will put a couple links in the show notes to videos on YouTube where that is explained and where you can see that in action. So, Haram, you've got quite some good photographic eye there. Kudos for spotting that. Good job. And of course, a Tips from the Top Floor sticker is on its way to you as a little thank you for sending in that question. And if you want to send in a question, hey, you know the drill. Record something on your smartphone. Send it to voice@tfttf.com. voice@tfttf.com.
Hello Chris, this is Hampus from Sweden. In 2 weeks I will be in Iceland and I will be going on a whale watching trip, and I wondered, what focal length would you recommend for trying to photograph whales from the boat? Thanks in advance to you or anyone else who wants to pitch in on the question. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks, Hampus. Good to hear from you again. We had whales last year in August in Greenland. And my general suggestion here is to get something on the long side. Use something that has a bit of a longer focal length. When you shoot whales, you will typically only see parts of the whale, like the dorsal fin or the what are they called? The tail flukes, the blowhole or what comes out of it, the burst of water and mist that comes out of it, and the flippers. Some whales like lying on their side, splashing water with the flippers. I think there's some mating thing going on there. If you're lucky, of course, you will also see a breaching whale. That's a whale jumping out of the water. But I personally wasn't lucky enough to see one of those myself just yet. Still working on that. But in general, it's kind of hard to predict how close the whales will get. And I've seen photos on just do a Google image search, breaching whale, and you will see that sometimes those whales can get really close to a ship. And that span between the very close up and the very far will kind of determine your focal length. And I know that a lot of photographers try, if they really want to be prepared, they will have two cameras, with one with a wide lens on it and one with a longer telephoto zoom lens on it. Now, last year when I went to Greenland, my long lens was the 70-300 on a crop sensor, and that gives you the equivalent field of view on the long end of a 480 millimeter lens on Canon. And that was okay, but sometimes a bit too short for me. So I have seen photos of whales that came really close to the ship, which would have required something shorter. But again, that range was okay, especially for like all the icebergs and glaciers and things like that. I mean, that was just perfectly fine, and not just fine, it was really good for that. But in some cases, I would have wished to have had something slightly longer. So the range, I now think that makes best sense for this kind of photography. If you only bring one camera and one lens, it would be a zoom lens in the range of like 200 to 600, 150 to 600, something in that range. And this year, just a few weeks ago in Svalbard, I had the opportunity to play with a couple lenses to see the latest Sigma offering in that range, which is a 150 to 600, and I could actually play with and put on my own camera a Tamron, I think also 150 to 600, and they were both quite good. So I think I haven't tried the Sigma myself, but I've seen results from it, and I was quite convinced of what that thing can do. And the Tamron on my own camera also was pretty good. So that's kind of the range that I would suggest, the 150 to 600. But don't be worried too much, because you will be in Iceland, and Iceland is in general just a wonderful place to do photography. And bring home what you can. I guess whale watching won't be the only thing you will be doing there. So make sure to get something that you can use to cover a bit more than that. You will be in the city. You will be probably out in the countryside, and with the beautiful lava fields and all the amazing other stuff that Iceland has to offer. So enjoy your tour to Iceland, and make sure to send some pictures back. Maybe share them on the Slack. How about that? The TFTTF Slack is one of the great places to do that, and it's a wonderful place where the TFTTF community meets and talks and shares and discusses photography.
Hi Chris, this is Adam from Kitchener, Ontario. I'm a hobbyist photographer and a new listener. As much as I enjoy my photography, my day job is computer security. Recently, I was wondering what methods you use to protect yourself from losing any of your pictures once they're digital, either through accidental deletion, hardware failure, or viruses like the recent WannaCry ransomware. Do you have any advice?
Thanks, Adam. Yes, I do have advice. And I have some of that advice comes from my own mistakes in the past. So I once had data loss where I lost half a year worth of photos, irrecoverably lost, because I had a crash of an external hard drive, and I had assumed back then that the backup was good, but the backup wasn't good. It was broken, and that is never going to happen to me again. I also in the past, believe it or not, worked for a software team that was doing enterprise backup software. So I'm kind of in that groove anyway. So different kinds of security for your data. And in general, okay, let's establish a general rule, and the amount of safety for your data varies kind of on the importance of the data, right? If it's vital to your business, then you should be more strict about these things. In general, I highly suggest to have at least one kind of automated backup going that just does it without you even having to interfere with it, because if there's a thing that you have to do on a daily or weekly basis, then it's probably not going to really happen. So, but in general, of course, you have to decide for yourself how strict you want to be, how important that data is. But in general, I mean, photos are kind of among the most important memories that we have, and losing them hurts. And that's why my personal rule, and it would hurt me on a personal level, but it would also hurt me on a business level. So my personal rule to protect myself from photo loss, that's just in general physical loss of data. I always try to have at least 2 or 3 copies of my data around. And yeah, a broken hard drive in my view is kind of equivalent to being caught by ransomware, because that, well, if you don't pay, that data is typically not recoverable, and then that's like a broken hard drive. So let me try to go through the process. I want to talk about while shooting, what I do to make sure that I don't lose photos due to some mishap, after shooting, and then when I'm back home, like when I'm on a tour and then I come back home. Those are kind of the 3 different times where I have to think about that. And while shooting, up to recently, I had 1 card slot in my camera, just 1 card, so there was no security during the shooting. If that card breaks, photos are gone. Hasn't really happened to me in many years of photography, though. Cards haven't broken on me. They haven't just gone belly up. I have since still switched to a camera that has 2 slots. Actually, both of my cameras now have 2 slots. And I do have 2 cards in those 2 slots, and I write to both. So I write the same images to both of those cards, which gives me kind of an instant backup. So if 1 card breaks, which again has never happened to me, but then that would give me a second copy of that. With the single camera, I established something that I call the 2-second rule, which is really the thing that I believe has, well, it might be voodoo, but I believe it really has something to do with why cards never broke on me, or file systems on cards never broke on me. And the 2-second rule is pretty simple. Before you take the card out of your camera, if you open that flap to take the card out, wait for 2 seconds. So here's what happens. And I'm pretty sure cameras still do this, at least some cameras. When you open the flap that has the card behind it, there's a little button usually that tells the camera, oops, card door open, do not do anything. So the camera shuts down, and it will do some last minute kind of housekeeping while it's shutting down. And that includes unmounting the hard drive, which in this case is the card. So you don't just switch it off. The camera will have to do a bit of maintenance work, and that sometimes, with some cameras, I believe still happens while the camera seems to be off, while it's not flashing any lights, but it will still kind of do this last minute. Just takes a second for it to do that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens. So if you wait for 2 seconds, you won't kind of pull the rug out under the camera doing its thing. And I believe a lot of the data loss that other people have seen happens when they're a bit too fast doing that. Again, might be different for different brands, but that's my personal experience. And again, in many years of shooting digital, I've never had a card die on me. And I believe that's one of the things that has prevented that from happening. So 2-second rule, wait for 2 seconds, then take the card out. Just go 1 banana, 2 banana, zip. What's known as one Mississippi, right? Different languages have different counting rules. Then the other thing that I believe has helped me avoid that is by using brand cards. And I don't care if you're a fan of SanDisk or Transcend or Sony or Lexar. I've always refused to use no name cards that just don't really ring a bell. I have this firm belief that the brand cards are typically a bit safer. I might be wrong, but it hasn't really. I haven't really had problems. Next thing is I test them up front, and that is one thing that helped me spot a couple of bad cards before I started using them. Now, here's what the problem with cards is, and that is a problem in some markets. That might be a problem for some dealers. is that there are counterfeit cards on the market. That is a fact. And what sometimes happens is that the counterfeiters will take cards from the actual production, because what happens when you make flash cards, when you make memory cards in a factory, is that a certain amount of these cards will be bad, and they would typically be scrapped or labeled with a lower capacity so that you would never use the bad memory cells on the card, because they would be like, let's say we're going for a 16 gigabyte card. They produce a 16 gigabyte card and it has an issue at 14 gigabytes in the memory cells that would be used around 14 gigabytes. So what they will do in the factory is they will mark that specific block of memory cells as bad and label the card as an 8 gigabyte card, and then the card will still work fine for 8 gigabytes, but it will never kind of touch those bad cells. Now, the counterfeiters will take these cards and relabel them back to 16 gigabytes, and the card will present itself to your camera and to your computer as a 16 gigabyte card. And then you can still use the first 8 gigabytes, no problem, but then it will sooner or later run into these bad cells, and then you have a problem. And in order to rule that out, I do test them up front. There's this tool. It's a bit of a command line thing. There might be a graphic user interface, but it's called F3, and it runs on the Mac. I don't know if it also is available on Windows, and this is a call to the community. If you have a tool that lets you test every single cell, every single memory cell on a flash card, then let us know and let me know, and I'll put it in the next episode. That's probably the easiest. Send a quick voicemail to voice@tfttf.com if you have a Windows solution here. But that's what F3 does. It writes stuff to the card. It kind of generates random files and writes them to that card until it's full. And then in a second process, it reads them back and looks if all of them are there. So if there would be bad memory cells, that would be discovered during that process. And I have had a card that had bad cells. Also, it shows you the speed of the cards, and this is going to be so hit and miss. What's on the card doesn't really mean that's the speed you will get. That's just a theoretical value. But that doesn't really matter that much. What is important is that those cards are fully usable to the end. But anyway, while shooting, I now use 2 cards, so I have 2 copies of my data on the cards in the camera. And then here's where the next step comes. After shooting, when I get back from wherever I was, I will import my photos onto my computer. I do this with Lightroom, and in that process, I will create a second copy. It copies the raw file from the card and puts it on the computer. Or a third copy if I had 2 cards in my camera. The key here is I will treat my memory cards like film. I will leave the photos on the card. And this way, I'll always have that second copy. I will not format a card in the camera. I'd rather buy a new card. I will format it much, much later in the process when I'm back home and the data has to be copied and so on. But at this point, I will not format the card. I leave the photos on there because that is a kind of a safety copy. And in the past, I had to use that when I borked something on my computer. But anyway, I will then work on my photos in Lightroom. And one of the last steps, but that's very Lightroom specific, is I will create smart previews of my photos. So those smart previews stay on the laptop, and I move the originals, the raw files, underlying raw files to an external drive. That's an SSD. It's a verbatim 256 gigabyte USB 3 SSD, an external one. It's small, it's lightweight. There are others available in that size and price range. It's like a credit card, just a bit thicker. And I keep that little SSD on me all the time. That holds a copy of my Lightroom catalog, which I back up to that one. It holds the raw files, and I always have it in a pocket, pants pocket with a zipper, or in a breast pocket of a jacket or something. That's my insurance, right? In case the cards get damaged or, God forbid, stolen, or camera gets stolen, or the laptop gets stolen. That's my backup. That's my insurance. I have this on me all the time. And Anyway, that's 3 copies now, right? I have 2 on the cards in the camera and 1 on the external SSD. Plus, I have the smart previews, which are not a full copy, but they're still usable in a pinch. They're not full resolution. But so this is like 3.5 copies at this point while I'm traveling. Now, when I get back home, I, again, import my Lightroom catalog from the laptop into my bigger system. And then I have the raw files. They go on an external USB 3 hard drive that sits under my desk. And that will then get backed up on an hourly basis using Time Machine to my NAS. I have a NAS in the house. It sits in the basement. It's hooked up with like gigabit Ethernet. And that gets backed up every hour from my big computer back home down to the NAS. So that's the first backup. And then it gets backed up, what we call an offsite backup to the cloud on a nightly basis. Every night, whatever's new gets backed up to over there. And that is, what do I use? Let me see. I tried different things. I think I'm on the Amazon cloud, Amazon Drive. I think it's $59 a year. And I use a piece of software called ARQ. Again, that's Mac only as far as I know. If there's a Windows thing that does the same thing, which I believe there probably is, again, let me know and I'll put it on the next episode. And that is kind of my added level of security in case of a disaster. You know, like the house burns down or it gets flooded, or there's probably no chance for flooding here, but bad things can happen, right? So my computer breaks and the NAS breaks at the same time, and lightning hits the house and fries all my electronics. I don't know. Many different things that could happen. And that backup in the cloud is all encrypted and everything, so no one else than me can read it for the foreseeable future. And that is my insurance in the cloud. And that offsite backup for me is also kind of what protects me from a potential ransomware issue. Because it's known that some ransomware will also encrypt a kind of like a time machine backup that you have hooked up to your computer. That has been reported in the past. So time machine backup alone, again, I'm not sure how smart they are at this point, but that's what I heard might be possible. And that external backup to the cloud, that is one of those things that is not really in danger because it keeps versions of things. So if something like a ransomware attack happens here, if I get infected with ransomware and it encrypts my entire system, then I could still kind of freshly install a clean system and then restore an older version of my photos from before that ransomware attack. So this is my many lines of defense here, Adam. I hope this wasn't too complicated. Again, I'm doing this for a business, and losing photos would not only hurt my feelings, but also my business. So that's why I'm kind of quite meticulous now doing these things. And I have a bit of I have automated it as much as I can. So when I return back home and have everything on my bigger system, it automatically gets backed up to Time Machine. It automatically gets backed up to the cloud. And then only once that has happened, I will reuse that card, and I will, if it's full, format that card in the camera, because up to that point, that card still has the originals on it. And if the worst happens, I can still go back to that card and restore it from there. And that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. If you want to receive Tips from the Top Floor regularly and automatically, hey, you can find it wherever you find your other podcasts on iTunes or in your podcast client of choice. And thanks again if you have left an iTunes rating or review. Also, thanks if you're one of the wonderful Patreon supporters. Ratings on iTunes help the community grow, and your support on Patreon helps me pay the bills for making and distributing this show. You're amazing. Thank you.
Leave it all behind. No matter where you
And before we end today's show, I want to revive a tradition we had here a while ago. I want to read one chapter out of the book A Lesser Photographer by C.J. Chilvers. And this one is titled Live First. Life happens between frames. If you don't put down the camera to experience your subject, how can you bring anything uniquely personal to the story? Great photography is just great storytelling. Great storytelling evolves from a life well lived. Live first. The best camera is already always with you because the best sensor is your brain and the best lens is your eyes. If you don't take the time to live, see, and experience before you photograph, you'll always be a cover band. Your goals will match the experiences of other photographers. Technique and gear seem insignificant if you have a message. Developing that message is worth at least as much time as you devote to the rest. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, silent partner in Hans-Peter Gagrud, publishing by Release Pixie, Matt Rev, Sitar Armstead, Slack Imitations by CIO Russ. My name is Chris Marquardt. Follow me on Facebook and on Twitter, Chris MarQuardt. And of course, go out and take amazing photos. Be nice to each other. And happy shooting.